Today's lecture is going to cover the family life cycle. I've written it on the board. It's a little bit too small to see, but I'll read them to you, the different stages in the family life cycle. The first one is the unattached young adult. And then once that unattached young adult leaves home, and then they marry. So marriage is a big marker. Having children, moving from children to adolescence, and moving from adolescence to the launching phase of those adolescents, to an empty nest phase, to a retirement phase, and possibly a nursing home or extended care, into a death. So this is the natural family life cycle. Betty Carter and Betty McGoldricks are the foremost leaders in the family life cycle field. This is where we will stay in their discussion of it. One caveat is that this is a ever-changing science, and for instance, they are thinking about adding divorce to the normative family life cycle because it's somewhere along this area they may try to add divorce into that as something that kind of happens in our family systems today. Another thought is they might add cohabitation instead of marriage or alongside marriage, because a lot of couples are cohabitating. So it is an evolving field, obviously, as our families change and move through various different life cycle changes. The first one is the unattached single leaving home. That's the first stage in the family life cycle. This is that they have already completed the launching process from their families into being a single young adult. So this process, which they moved from exiting their families of origin into creating a space for just themselves, they start with the formation, or they've already began that formation of their life goals, personal life goals. What is it I want to do with my life? Where am I going to go from here? The development of their identity, the continued formation of that started early in their adolescence to who are they going to be? Kind of who am I going to be when I grow up, kind of a thing. Well, now they're kind of growing up. So what are some of those processes? And they will continue that process, for several years to come. But this is the beginning stages of that, in the formative stages. And then becoming independent, not using their parents, for financial backup or other things, that they're being independent on their own. So the emotional process is of this transition. So each one of these transitions are going to be different processes. And one of them is going to be the emotional process. So the emotional process for these young adults is accepting the emotional and financial responsibility for yourself. That's a big change. There's a big change from having this big, safety net around you when you're living with your folks, to having a safety net being semi-removed, if not removed altogether, depending upon the circumstance. Well, that's a big emotional change, is moving from dependence to independence. The shift to the adult to adult status between the parents, because before it was I'm your child and now we're both kind of adults. It requires a mutual respect and a personal form of relating that is different than the form of relating that they had been used to. So it's a big change, moving from living with your folks to being on your own. Maybe you're not talking as much. They're not being called for every little thing that goes on in your life, and you're resolving more of your issues on your own. Young people sort out emotionally what they will take along with them in their families of origin, from their families of origin, what they'll leave behind. So they're forming something new. What will it be like? Will my home be decorated differently than my parents? Probably, of course. Will it have the same kind of structure? Emotionally, what will it look like for us to be in a family? What will we be creating ourselves into? Moving again from the way that our parents emotionally arrange their home into the way that we do that. So from emotional to change in the family status, this is required if we're going to proceed developmentally. So a differentiation of self in relation to the family of origin. And this is huge. Dr. Mary Bowen, who is a psychologist, and who really did a lot of work in systems theory, is kind of like the grandfather of general systems theory in psychology. Murray Bowen talks about this idea of differentiation. So what is healthy is when you leave your family of origin, that you are a differentiated young adult. Now that means that you have a strong sense of self. So another word for differentiation, another way to describe it, is a strong sense of self. People who leave their home with a strong sense of self have much more ability to adapt and to be flexible in this family system that they are creating for themselves, especially as it relates to marriage. You do not want to go into a marriage relationship not being differentiated from your parents. So what that means is, in practice, is a differentiated young adult has a strong sense of who they are. They don't call their parents for a lot of backup. They have cut the proverbial apron strings, if you will. They no longer rely on their parents for all the information of life. We don't call them about how do I cook this dinner, or how do I do laundry, or my car is making a noise. I mean, we can call them for those things, but we don't necessarily need them. We're differentiated enough that we're separate from. In essence, we are our own entity. We are now our own family system that we're creating by ourselves, being a part of the larger family context, of course. Now, that doesn't mean that if you're calling your parents for help, for things that you're undifferentiated, it doesn't mean that. It just means that the stronger you have a sense of who you are, the more differentiated you become, the less you have a need to involve your parents in your life as you did before. We always will have a want, hopefully, a want to have them involved in our lives, but not necessarily a need. So if, for instance, a young lady has not cut the apron strings emotionally with her mom and her dad, then when that person gets married, which is our next life cycle we'll talk about, they tend to go back and forth between the husband and the wife's parents, and that causes some conflict. Same thing with the husband. If the husband is not fully differentiated, that whenever there's issues in the family, he's going back to his family of origin to ask for help in solving these issues instead of using just the relation between the husband and wife. They're triangling, so to speak, the parents with the wife and the husband, which is never really a good thing to have. It's good to have backup, absolutely, and that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a need for these people in our lives. So the differentiating of self in relationship to the family of origin, meaning they're forming their own life goals, their own developing of an identity of who they are. And then developing the development of intimate peer relationships. Peer relationships are important. As you are a single adult, this is your crowd, this is your tribe, this is who you are relating to. And it's important for you to have those kinds of structures. And also the establishment of a self in relationship to work and financial independence. So the young adult is going to find themselves having a relationship to their work and to what they're doing at their job, and also financially being independent away from, again, their parents. Now, parents can help, of course, from time to time, but the bottom line is that you are financially pretty much, going on to life as your own self. The next part of the family life cycle from unattached young adult is to the joining of families through marriage. So the new couple, marriage is the next one. So two individuals who come from separate families of origin unite to make a new family system. So it's the union of two entire different family systems and the development of a third. So here's the husband's family of origin, his mom and dad and grandparents and children of his parents, his siblings. And then there's your wife's and her family of origin, grandparents, siblings, and etc. And then there's this new family, this new formation. Now in Scripture it says, for this cause shall a husband and wife leave their mother and father and cleave only to themselves. So three family systems. Now we are developing this new family system, which is separate from, yet connected to these families. I like to look at it this way. This one family of origin, another family of origin, and then a new family of origin. And the new family of origin is connected by a little bit of this over here. So they're not completely separate from these family systems, of course, but they are their own family system with some interconnectedness here because of the wife and the husband. So this is the union of these two entire family systems coming together. Now the family task is moving from individual independence, which they have been as single young adults, to a couple or a dyadic interdependence. So now we are finding that we are not looking, and the struggle is not to find, independence from our parents to ourselves and then find a strong sense of self. Once that is accomplished, then we're going to move to finding a strong interdependence with this couple in this dyadic way that we are joining of two together. The emotional process of this transition of joining together as husband and wife is a commitment to the new system. Now that's really important. Now this system for the husband has been his most important family system. This system for the wife has been her most important family system. Now we're going to find that this system, not only from a family science perspective, but from a biblical perspective, that this family system now finds a commitment to each other in this system. So all of our resources, time, and energy no longer is in these systems, it's in this system with occasional, connection into these family systems. So the change in the family status required to proceed developmentally if we're going to move healthy through this family system. Now again, from the family life cycle, to move healthy is both of us be differentiated young adults, then find each other in marriage. And in marriage, we differentiate from our families even more to form this family unit. And now the change is required to proceed developmentally as this one new family unit is the formation of the marital system, a strong formation of the family system. Now that includes a lot of things. For instance, every time there's an issue within the new family, you don't find yourself running to your old family systems to find resolution. You want to have a marriage resolution ability to take care of these things on your own. There's a realignment of relationships with extended families and friends that includes the spouses. So before it's just you and your buddies or you and your girlfriends, now it's you and these married folks are now relating to your friends and to your family in a different way. It's an inclusion. When you were single or even when you were engaged, if somebody maybe out of town were to pass away, maybe the fiance would be included in going to the funeral, or maybe she stays at home and works while the fiance goes to that. Well, when you're married, you find that you both will go to that. It's expected. It's no longer a me or a me and her or me and him. It's a we, that we're together. So if somebody's going to a funeral, we are going to go, and we're going to go together, or we're not going to be able to go. And again, not hard and fast, but I'm just giving you just a general rule of thumb, is that there is a strong sense of we-ness in this process of growing together with the new couple. And there's a lot of changes that happen during this time, a lot of transitions for parents of the children who have now formed this new system. They're trying to hold on to the connectedness. And just like when you were moving through adolescence, you're trying to, find out who you are as an individual. Now you're trying to find out who you are as a couple. I can remember when my son was born, and my mom called and wanted to come and see the baby with my family. And I said, yes, of course. And then I said this, I said, tell Dad that he can't drink in my house. Now, in my family system, it's different than the family system I came from. My new family doesn't allow alcohol in the house. So if you want to be in my house, then you're going to come without alcohol. And of course, my dad resisted and was mad at me, and my family ganged up on me because that's what alcoholic families do. And so what we found out was that me forming my new family, different than the family that I came from, was a struggle. And it was quite a difficult transition. Now my dad did come, and he didn't bring any alcohol. He came into the house, he saw my son, he wasn't drunk. I wouldn't allow the effects of alcohol in my house either. So if you're drunk, you can't come in. I didn't have to do that. He came in the morning and he was fine. And then when he got in his car, when he was leaving, he rolled his window down and held out his beer and said, "Hey, I got my beer. I'm leaving now." When he's drinking and driving, but you know, it was the 70s and he didn't think there was any problem with that. But the bottom line was that my family had some stress related to this transition. Every family will have some stress relating to the transition. Because you see, you have two families now that are outside of your main family, which is the one you just developed. And each family will have their own struggle. There might even be some competition between the two in-law families as how much time they get to see you and how often you go to the mom and dads of your wife, how often you go to the mom and dad and the family of your husbands. So these are things that are, again, difficult to bear out. Well, the next transition, so we have single young adult moving to marriage. The next transition is becoming a parent, families with children. Entering this stage requires the adults now to move up a generation and become caregivers to a younger generation. So remember, this is a horizontal process, but now we find the vertical process coming into play here, is that you are no longer just kids yourself. Now you are parents of children. You become a parent of a child. This requires a new commitment of time as parents, understanding the role of parents, the husband's role, the wife's role, adapting to the developmental changes in the children as they grow. This is, again, a difficult transition. So the reason that we look at these markers is because we have seen these as difficult transitions that we have to make as we move through the life cycle. Each transition is marked. Young adult, married, now married with children. Significant change that happens in your relationships, in your emotional world, in your physical world, the practical world, the world of everyday life. And there's a lot of different things that we have to do during this stage. The first task is from interdependence to incorporation of dependence. So you are interdependent upon each other, husband and wife, and now all of a sudden you have this child who is absolutely dependent upon you for everything. I mean, your world stops. If you had hobbies, they're on hold. You know, if you were just, rip-roaring at your work, these are going to have to hold for a little bit as well, because you have to adapt this new environment to this new transition. Now, the first year, you have a development of the parental identity. What kind of parents are we going to be? How are we going to raise our children? Some say, well, I'm not going to say no because I was always say no to. I'm going to say, well, we'll see, or we're just not going to have a hard no. We're not going to spank. We're not going to do certain things. As you start thinking about, now all of a sudden, I'm a parent. It kind of freaked me out. I was a young parent. I was 20 when I became a parent. And that was difficult. I was not very mature. I had a lot of growing up to do. I was differentiated for sure, but I didn't have a lot of experience. I did have 5 other siblings, and 3 or 4 of them I was able to help raise. So I had some understanding, much more perhaps than my middle child wife had, when there was only one child that she had to help maybe care for. But what kind of parents are we going to be? The second one in the first year is the enhancement of bonding between the child and each parent. Now, it's natural, of course, for the child to have a bonding with the mom. It has to be very intentional for the dad to have a bonding with the child. Lots of time, lots of holding, lots of caretaking. My dad, I don't believe, ever changed a diaper. Not a lot of attachment with my dad, but a lot of attachment with my mom. Now, as you move through the family as a child ages to like a toddler, now there's a little bit of an enhancement of autonomy for the child and for the parents too, because as a toddler they're busy and they're into everything, but they don't need you for everything. You're able to sit them down and maybe they can feed themselves a little bit. Maybe they can go find their shirt and bring it to you, and you can help them put it on. But there's a little bit of autonomy going on, and then an enhancement of what's going to happen in the gender role and identity of the child. and being able to help form that child and their identity of them becoming separate even from you. And then you have lots of different interactions with the parent and the child of each sex. The wife interacts differently with the child than the father does. Maybe the father is more, and again I'm being general and typical, is more rough and tumble. The wife is more nurturing. This is our general characteristics, although we're not held to those. And certainly my wife likes to tumble with the kids as well. So I'm just saying that each parent will have to find their way with their children as it relates to their gender. And then the enhancement of the relationship between the dad and the son, or the mother and the daughter, or the dad and the daughter, and the mother and the son. These are all integral, wonderful patterns and relationships that the kids need both of you there to be very helpful. So now as we're thinking about these parents and families with children, there's some emotional processes in this transition. The first one, of course, is accepting new members into the system. This is an alien child that comes into your home. One day was in the belly, and now it's fully formed. There it is, and it's right in front of you. What are we going to do? So there's lots of different changes in our emotional life as it relates to having this child. A lot of wonder, a lot of love, a lot of emotions of just, I'm so happy, I'm so fulfilled. For the wife and the husband both have different varying degrees of emotional connectedness to what is happening with this child, overwhelmed by the fact of this love, of this care for this child. It's pretty amazing. Change in the family status required to proceed developmentally is adjusting the marital system to make space for a child or for children. This is a difficult one at times, because here's what we used to do. And if we waited a while before we had children, we had a long pattern of several years of here's what we do. And that pattern has been disrupted. So we have to make a marital adjustments of getting ready for these children to come into our family system. And that can be very challenging, of course, because, especially back to adaptability and flexibility. The more adaptable and flexible we are, the easier these transitions become. So going with the flow a little more, recognizing, knowing, obviously knowing, having an understanding and an awareness of the fact that this is going to change our marriage and we need to prepare for that. So reading books ahead of time, seeing a counselor, all these things are very important, be very useful and helpful to you as they move through this developmental part. And then the joining in child rearing together, we're raising this child together. The financial and household tasks, these have to change a little bit because we have a new little one in the house. Someone is doing a lot of child care over here. So while that's happening, then I have to take care of this over there. And so there's a lot of adjusting to take place. And then there's a realignment of relationships with extended family to include parenting and grandparenting. So we have a lot of time now with our grandparents who want to see the child, who want to be with the child, who want to take the child here and take the child there. Some of it is very wonderful and easy and augments in a great way, and sometimes it can take away. So now all of a sudden we're finding ourselves setting boundaries, having our parents call before they come over, saying, listen, would it be okay if, we came over and, took the baby, or took the toddler to lunch with us or whatever. You have to set certain boundaries that this is a good time or this is not a good time. So there's a lot of adjustments, as you can imagine, with realigning this family relationship, including, all of the above. So we'll do this for several years, and we move into the adolescent phase of our family life cycle development. The family task is dependence of facilitation of parental independence and expansion. So the adolescent is looking for independence. They're looking for, again, forming a sense of self. The emotional process in this transition is increasing flexibility of family boundaries to include that adolescent's independence and maybe even grandparents' frailties, understanding that, they have to be a little more careful of grandma and grandpa now that they're older. Just another transition in that family system. But this emotional process of flexibility, as I mentioned earlier, is difficult because now you're moving from a child to an adolescent. And the longer they're in adolescence, the more freedom and independence you want to be able to give to them, to provide for them a good roadmap on becoming independent. So you want to give them different tasks to perform, different ways of doing it. No longer does because I said so work. We have to explain why we're doing what we're doing. Not we have to, and I must do this because my kids need that or whatever. No, it's like I want to do that. I want to do it because I want to provide for them a roadmap to a healthy individual, strengths of who they are and help them to become the best that they can be. Might be a time when the adolescent gets to stay up until 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock on a school night instead of 8 o'clock like the siblings, or 8:30, giving them a little bit more leeway. If the other kids need to be in the house, at dark, then the adolescent can stay out an hour after dark, or those kinds of things. You're giving them a little bit more autonomy, maybe even some different rules in the rest of the family, because it sets up within them an understanding of this is what children do, this is what adolescents do. And the differentiation of that moves them to a more natural way to go to the next level. So increased flexibility, independence, recognizing that they are now becoming more and more responsible for themselves. The change in the family system required to proceed developmentally is a shifting of parent-child relationships to permit adolescents to move in and out of the system. Before, your children were home. When they got home from school, they may have gone and played a little bit, then they come home and they stay home. And now, when they're in the adolescent phase of their development, they're moving into more of a, can I be gone for a while longer? Can I stay away for several hours? Can I spend the night more with my buddies over here, or do more trips here and there? A little bit more independence to move in and out of the system where the family, it's very good because it gives them the ability to see other families. It gives them the ability to be with other people and then come back into the family. And it also gives the family that's at home an opportunity to adjust to the fact that this child is slowly transitioning out. Instead of, moving from everybody being in the house to one day that person leaves, now it's like there's in and outs of that person here and there, hours of time, maybe even a weekend or so of blocks of time, and we're getting used to that person moving in and out. So it's a shifting of that role. It's also a refocus on the parents and their midlife, their time, their marriage, their career. So we're moving into a time where we're going to see the kids are moving out. What's that going to look like? In my private practice of counseling, I see a lot of couples as they're entering the launching phase, because in the launching phase, they're beginning to recognize, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but they're beginning to recognize that there's just going to be us pretty soon. And who is he or who is she without the children around? So it's a reconnecting of this marital life that we have been focusing more on our children. We don't want to be a child-focused family. We want to be a healthy, marital-focused family with an emphasis on the children. And if you see it that way, then our marriage is continuing to grow through childbearing and through adolescence. We don't want to put our marriage on hold when we have children. We want to continue developing our marriage. And that gets done by children being in and out, having date nights, going to babysitters, staying overnight with the grandparents, so you have some reconnecting time. So then you have to think about this, the career of what you're doing. What am I going to continue to do? Is this what I want to do? I needed to be in this career to raise the children, but now they're getting ready to launch and all of that. Where do I go from there? So these are beginning to brew in our mind, and they become more emphasized in the next part of the life cycle. And we're also beginning to shift towards joint caring for older generations. So as parents, you are not only taking care of your children, but you might see the beginnings of needing to take care of your parents and the adults that raised you. So that adds another dimension to the family life cycle. We've called it before the sandwich generation, where I'm taking care of my parents, and here's me in between, and now I'm taking care of my children, and we're kind of lost in the middle. So that's a difficult time as well. So once we get into adolescence and We begin this launching phase. This is the time of launching children. It plays an important role in how do you link the generations together. So while your children are exiting the family, you're also finding ways to help them to still connect to their older generation, and then to adapt to your own midlife changes in life, because you're coming to this place. You've all heard of the midlife crises, and kind of like, how does a cliche happen, and where it's because this is normative. Midlife crisis is normative because we have been focused on raising our children, and now we can focus more on ourselves. What do I want to do? What kind of car do I want to drive? Maybe I don't like to drive the minivan or the station wagon. I like to have a sports car. This is the kind of traditional generalized things that we think about because I'm thinking about myself for the first time in many years. These are kind of the components of midlife crisis. So you want to adjust to these things, develop through those things. The family task is to support the facilitation and the beginning or partial separations to complete independence. So them going to school is a partial separation. They're coming back perhaps, but right now they're in school. They come back for spring break and Christmas, vacation and all of that. And it's great, it's wonderful. So there's ins and outs, and we're in this midlife time. I can remember that when my kids went to Mid-America, we only lived about 15 minutes, maybe 10 minutes from the campus. But they were on their own, and they were at Mid-America living in student housing, living in the dorms. And they were kind of on their own, and they came back during spring break and Christmas break and those kinds of things. What we were finding out was, man, we've changed since they've left. We don't let dishes sit around on the counter or in the sink. We don't let them, do. And so we told the kids, hey, things have changed since you've left, and you got to put your dishes in the dishwasher now. You have to do these things, and we don't want this place a mess. It's been perfectly clean, for the last 6 months, and now you come home and everything's everywhere. We're not going to do that. So put your clothes in the laundry room, not on the floor in your bedroom, because mom's not going to come pick them up anymore. You're going to need to put them in there. And by the way, you got to do your own laundry if you haven't already done that before. So you're beginning these separations, these tasks to the transitions, and so it becomes very difficult in our midlife time. The emotional process of this transition is accepting the multiple exits and entries into the family system. Just what I talked about. There's times when they're going to be coming in and leaving, and that might happen more and more. It's happening now. It used to be a lot of times when kids would leave home to go to school. After they went to school, they would just get a job and get their own apartment. When I was growing up, after you graduated high school in Chula Vista, California, where I'm from, you're expected to, hey, it's time to leave. You graduate high school, now get a job, get an apartment, and go. So these are the things that we were doing during that time. And so there was lots of entrances and exits into the family, and that's kind of the thing you have to adjust to and adjust emotionally to that. Changes in the family system required to proceed developmentally is a renegotiation of the marital system as a dyad. We are no longer a family with children. We're just the two of us. How do we adjust that? It was difficult when my kids went to college. They went to college within a year of each other. And it was difficult when it was just the two of us because we were organized around our children. What do they want to watch? What do they want to do? Trying to find activities for them. And it just became us. And how are we going to, adapt to this successfully? A development of adult relationships between the grown children and the parents. Again, no longer because I said so, or, hey, will you go do this or will you go do that for me? No, it's more like you're kind of on your own, guys. What can I do to help you? If you have a question, I'm here, but I'm not going to come over and, take care of your leaky toilet. You can Google that and YouTube it and figure out how to take care of that, where I don't have to do everything for you. And then you have a realignment of relationships to include the in-laws and grandchildren. So sometimes at our family Thanksgiving, we have the in-laws come to our family Thanksgiving. Sometimes we have the in-laws' siblings come. It just changes, and we have to realign that. Then we have to deal with different things that are happening as we age in our midlife, disabilities of our parents, decisions that we have to make of caring for them. That's also different. So after we go into midlife, we get into a couple of different phases. After empty nest is retirement, perhaps, or what it looks like as we begin to slow down. You know, the stages of this life cycle may be retirement for families, grandparenting, continuing the expansion of independence by our children. Perhaps we are in our later lives as we retire. We're going through our homes so that our children don't have to go through them as much. We're giving them things that they might want that we want to pass on as heirlooms. You know, we are looking at what life is like now that we're not going to be working. And it's a difficult transition for each husband and wife. Both perhaps have careers that they're retiring from, that they had a sense of purpose, a sense of self. So some of the issues in retirement have to do with who am I now that I'm not working? You know, what's my identity? And for some, it's just an absolute wonderful time of getting out and just having a great time. No responsibilities to speak of as far as work is concerned. And then trying to figure out how we're going to live financially. And then you're going to facilitate a family mourning and working through final separations of grandparents and even of yourselves as you find yourself aging. And of course, the final stage after the retirement is really the death and families in later life, accepting the different shifting roles generationally. When grandparents die, they no longer are the keepers of the family, this or that. Now it's the parents. Maybe it's you now are taking care of those things. And then eventually those will have to transition to your children. So if you're going to changes in the family status required to proceed developmentally in this stage is maintaining your own and couple functioning and the interests that face the physiological decline of yourself, of your parents, etc. So all of these things factor into the family. My wife and I are caring sometimes for her parents in the coronavirus thing that we're in right now, buying groceries for them, making sure they're okay and staying isolated and taking care of their needs. And there's kind of a glimpse of what it's going to be like in the next several years to try to take care of them a little bit more and spending time doing that. In our retirement years, that's what we'll be doing. My parents have both died. My mom 3 years ago, my father 25 years ago or 30 years ago or so. And, you know, my transition has been easier. But it also is kind of a roadmap for my wife's family and the transitions that we're going to have to do there. We're also going to have to think about the new roles of development of what's going to be happening. So when you get to this place in your family life, so you're retiring, maybe you go into a nursing home and looking at the possibility of your final transition or your death. What are the things that you're going through emotionally? You know, looking over your life, assessing your life. How did I do? How are things going? You know, how am I going to keep a legacy going, you know, once I pass away? You're going to find that you're going to need more support from the people that you have raised, your children, making room for people to help make decisions for you, and dealing with the loss of a spouse, dealing with the loss of siblings, and perhaps dealing with your own death. So these are major factors in the family life cycle, beginning from being an unattached young adult all the way through to retirement, eventually death. And what are the normative transitions that I'm going to have to face? Now, obviously, there are probably 50 more transitions that you're going to have to face when you lose a job or somebody gets sick, etc., etc. But these are the normative ones for now, the family life cycle.